During Jesus' final week on this earth, as we've kind of been walking through this week, we've seen him go through an amazing range of emotions, to the celebration and joy of his triumphal entry, to a time of worship and prayer with his disciples, and that intimate moment at the table, to where just before the lesson we're going to look at today, Jesus is betrayed by somebody he cared about, somebody that he loved. And we've watched Jesus go through this just amazing roller coaster of a week. And now we've gotten to Thursday, the day before Jesus is going to be arrested, he's going to be tried, he's going to be beaten, he's going to be tortured. All these things are about to happen to Jesus. And before that takes place, he brings his disciples to a place not unlike this, a garden, not much different than the one I'm standing in right now. He brings them to this garden to do the one thing that strengthens us to get through that storm that we know is coming. He brings them to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray. Now I want to read the text to you. It's Mark chapter 15. I'm going to read verses 32 through 36. And the text says, "And they came to a place named Gethsemane. And he said to his disciples, 'Sit here until I have prayed.' And he took with him Peter and James and John, and he became very distressed and troubled. And he said to them, 'My soul is deeply grieved to the point of death. Remain here and keep watch.' And he went a little beyond them and fell to the ground and began to pray, that if it were possible, the hour might pass by. And he was saying, 'Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will.'" Those amazing and powerful words that Jesus shares with us right here in verse 36. We hear them all the time in our churches, especially during Easter time, where Jesus says, "Yet not my will, but your will." Some people say, "But not my will be done, but your will be done." Listen, on the surface, that's a very noble and honorable statement. And we like to say it a lot in churches, and we like to say it a lot in our personal lives, and sometimes we mean it. I would say most of the times we mean it when we say those things. And we're talking about whether or not we need to spend a little bit of extra money on vacation, or we're going to be able to go do these things with our spare time because we have a little bit of spare time. Oh, but I'm going to sacrifice those things for God's will. I want God's will to be done. But what we don't really admit, and what the truth is, what we tend to do is we tend to put these limits on what His will is. That yeah, within these limits, Lord, if you call me to sacrifice a little bit, and as long as it stays within these limits, hey, I'll sacrifice for you. I'll do what you called me to do. And we won't admit that that statement has a limit for us. That, well, hold on now, you didn't say anything about sending my kids on the mission field in some foreign land. You didn't say anything about me selling my possessions and helping the poor. You didn't say anything about me not going on vacation at all and using that money to help support a missionary. Now you're asking a little bit much here, Jesus. That's that point in time where our relationship with Jesus becomes inconvenient for our personal lives. See, we love that noble and honorable statement, "Not my will, but your will be done." But a lot of times we don't really see it within the context of what Jesus is talking about here. Because in this moment, when Jesus comes into the garden and he's praying and he's talking to his disciples about keeping watch and praying with him, Jesus, he knows. He knows the conflict and he knows the pain that's about to happen. He knows what he's about to go through physically. He knows what he's about to go through emotionally. He knows what he's about to go through spiritually. He knows about all that pain that's about to come his way. A pain and a struggle that no human being can possibly fathom. That our human minds cannot grasp what Jesus was about to go through in that moment. And as Jesus is getting ready to go into that storm, it helps us to understand the depths of that statement not my will, but your will be done. So as Jesus and his disciples get to the garden and they begin to pray, you see in verse 33 where Jesus tells Peter, James, and John, hey, come a little bit further with me. Come a little bit farther with me. He says, because I am deeply distressed. I am deeply distressed. And this phrase here, deeply distressed, it means more than just a little bit nervous. Sometimes we think, Jesus was just nervous about what was going to happen. It's far more important than that. I tell you, I've been preaching for years now. I've been, as a senior pastor, I've been a senior pastor for years, get up every Sunday morning and preach. I'm doing these lessons on a weekly basis. I've been preaching since I was 20 years old. And almost inevitably, every time on Sunday morning before I get up and I'm face to face with hundreds of people, and about to do public speaking, I still get a little bit nervous. And for me, I think that's a good thing. I think I should be just a little bit nervous that I'm about to talk in front of hundreds of people. Listen, that is not what Jesus is feeling right here. He's not feeling a little bit nervous because what he's about to go through. This phrase right here, deeply distressed, it actually means a deep state of terror, a deep feeling, emotion of terror. Because don't forget that not only was Jesus 100% human, he was 100% God. And in his divine and infinite mind, he knew exactly what was about to happen. He knew the physical torture that he was about to endure, that he was going to suffer at the hands of those Roman soldiers that were going to beat him and scourge him to the point of death, and how he was going to have the nails driven through his wrist and his ankles, how he was going to be mocked and made fun of, and when they crucified somebody, they stripped them completely naked to humiliate them before their community. He knew that perfect relationship that he had with the Father was going to be broken. That in his divine and infinite mind, Jesus knew all of these things that were about to happen to him. And in that knowledge, the text says he became deeply distressed at what was about to happen. And listen, I know that sounds almost unbiblical to say that Jesus had a state of terror in his heart, that Jesus had a state of terror in his emotion. He was 100% God, but he was also 100% human too. And in his humanity, we see the fact that Jesus did not look forward to what he was going to have to go through. Because he was human like us, because he felt the same emotions like we do. Because Jesus got hungry, he got tired, he had moments of joy, he had moments of happiness and excitement, he had also moments of sadness and brokenness and grieving. That in his divine, infinite knowledge of what was going to take place the very next day, it caused the humanity of Jesus to feel a sense of deep grieving and terror. And what he tells us in verse 34, I'm going to read verse 34 again. These are his own words of Jesus. And it said, and he said to them, my soul is deeply grieved to the point of death. Remain here and keep watch. See, in Jesus' own words, he says he was deeply grieved to the point of death. That he had that feeling within him that just these emotions that he was going through in the garden, that pain, that anticipation of what was about to happen to him, that in and of itself felt like it was going to kill him. You may have said the phrase, hey, this is going to kill me. I think that if I got to go through this, or if I got to keep doing this, this is just going to kill me. As we're recording this right now, or the reason we're having to record this is because as a community, we're doing the whole social distancing thing with this COVID-19 going around. And I've heard one parent, not in my house, but I've heard one parent say more than one time, if they have to stay at home with their kids any longer, it's going to kill them, or they're going to kill their kids. We say those things jokingly. We say those things to give some type of symbolic image to the frustration or hurt or just boredom that we're feeling in the moment. What Jesus was saying here is beyond symbolism. It's beyond a simple conveying of a feeling. It was the culmination of everything that he's about to go through. Just the knowledge of that and the emotion of that, he felt like, in this moment, I don't know if this is going to kill me in this very moment. So when Jesus is feeling this sense of anguish and deep distress and terror, and all these emotions are building up inside of him, and he knows what he is about to go through. He knows what lies ahead of him over the next 24 hours. How does he deal with that? What does Jesus do in that moment to be able to deal with those emotions, to be able to deal with that situation? Well, what he does is he sets a beautiful example for the rest of us. He prays. He takes his disciples, he comes to a garden, and he spends time talking to his Father. And what's interesting when we see what Jesus says in his prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane, he's just honest. He's honest. Because we have to understand again that prayer isn't about us moving God towards us or somehow having to convince God that we have this wonderful, great plan. We've got everything figured out. And what we're trying to do is talk God into accepting our plan. Prayer is about us just laying our hearts out before God and accepting the plan he has for us. And accepting what he would have us to do in this life. See, Jesus comes to the garden and he doesn't downplay what's about to happen. He doesn't act like everything's going to be fine. He doesn't say, well, it's all going to be okay. He lays out his heart that this is going to be very difficult. And that human side of Jesus is, if there's a way for this cup to pass from me, let it pass. But in his divine mind, he knows there's not a way. So he says, my will not be done, but yours. See, Jesus, in his time of anguish and pain and hurt, he does the thing that we all need to do in that moment. He goes to his Father in a time of prayer, and he lays out his heart, and he says, Father, not my will, but your will be done. And in verse 36, we see the true strength of Jesus in that moment. We see the source of power and the ability to Jesus to keep moving forward into that storm that's coming that he received from going to his Father in prayer. Again, Jesus knew about everything that was going to lay ahead of him. He knew all the pain and hurting and brokenness that was going to lay ahead of him, but yet he still chose to move forward even knowing all those things. It reminds me of some men that I knew at a previous church that I pastored, that some of them, they were older gentlemen and they fought in World War II. A couple of them were actually part of the group of men that stormed the beaches of Normandy. One of them was a paratrooper, and he went ahead a couple of days before they stormed the beaches of Normandy. He parachuted in about 20 or 30 miles into France, and he landed. He knew that when he landed, when he jumped out of that airplane and he landed in France, that he was going to be surrounded by the enemy. He knew that he was going to be surrounded by German soldiers that wanted to kill him. And these men did their best with the words that they had to describe for me what it was like to storm the beaches of Normandy. That as they're standing there in that boat, and there's no top to it, and the front of the boat basically comes down, as they're getting closer and closer and closer, they could hear the German guns going off. They could hear the water around them exploding. To know that the only thing that in that moment was keeping them alive was that big metal door that was right in front of them. But when they got close enough to the beach, that door was coming down, and they had to move forward. And then, again, they did their best to describe to me what the emotions were like. To know that that door was about to come down, and that German guns were right on them. And they had to keep moving forward. I think that's one of those things, listening to them talk, that you can't describe it the way it really is, and you can't listen to it and know exactly what it was like. because it's one of those things you can't really put into words, the strength you had to have in that moment to keep moving forward. And as powerful as that moment was on those beaches of Normandy, that was nothing compared to what Jesus was going to have to go through on the cross. That storm that Jesus was going to have to face. That he knew those Roman soldiers were coming. He knew those temple guards were going to be there within moments to arrest him, to beat him, to try him, to torture him, and to kill him. He knew he was going to have to go through all of those things. Yet what did Jesus say? He said, not my will, but your will be done. And listen, this is one of those things that we need to understand, that I love what Jesus says in verse 36. I'm going to read verse 36 again, and we'll be done. Verse 36, and he says, Abba, Father. That word Abba means daddy. That personal, intimate relationship that Jesus had with the Father. He called him daddy. And he knew that that relationship was about to be broken. That is, Jesus took on the sin of all mankind on the cross. That intimate daddy relationship was going to be broken. He says, Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. See, we can't miss that phrase right there, for you. Because Jesus wasn't necessarily doing this for him. And sometimes we even make the cross about us. But the cross isn't about us. The cross is about the glory of the Father. The cross is about the power and the grace and the mercy of the glory of God bringing us into a right relationship with him. See, the glory of the cross is about the Father. We just get to receive the beauty of that glory. We get to be the recipients of his grace and his mercy and forgiveness. So we have to be very careful when we make the cross about us, because it's not about us. He said, it is for you. And at the end of verse 36, he says, yet not my will, but what you will. That Jesus was completely and totally committed to the will of God. No matter what it cost him, no matter what storm he was about to go into, that Jesus was completely sold out for the will of God in his life. And listen, that's my prayer for us as individuals and as different churches in our community, that when we say, not my will, but your will be done, that we actually mean it. That we're not putting those limitations on what God can do with our lives and with our churches. That not my will, but your will, as long as I'm comfortable with it. We don't get to put qualifications on it. We don't get to put limitations on your will be done. We just do what he tells us to do. We just take the steps and move forward as the Father tells us. So again, my prayer for you as an individual, my prayer for us as churches, that we will do what the Lord wills us to do, and that through that, the community of Leeds and Moody and Irondale and all those around us, they will get to see the glory of our Heavenly Father. Let me pray for you. Father, I thank you for the opportunity to be able to read your word, to be able to stand in beautiful gardens like this and be reminded of the strength of Jesus, the commitment of Jesus, his love for you, his love for your will, and his strength to do it no matter what it was going to cost. Father, I pray that as individuals and as churches, when we say the phrase, not my will, but your will be done, that we would mean it. That we would mean it without qualification, and that we would mean it without limitation. And that when we say it, we will then be obedient. And that everything we say and everything we do will be for you, as verse 36 says. It will not be for any individual, for any church, but it will be only for you. May your Spirit guide us, and may your Spirit give us wisdom to know how to love and serve the way Jesus loved and served. And it's in his name I pray these things. Amen.